brachial plexus also comes from cervical nerves, okay? So from C5 through C8 and also thoracic one. That's the only nerve from the thoracic region that is going to be part of a plexus, okay? Crazy braiding going on here, see? All these are part of the brachial plexus. Which ones do we need to know? And we're gonna go back to your list. I already did mine. So go back to your list, and now where it says brachial, look at each one of these nerves and try to fill it up. So we have the axillary, the musculocutaneous, the radial, the median, and the ulnar nerves. So let's talk about what they do. The axillary is going to innervate your deltoid, your teres minor, the skin of the shoulder, okay, and joints in that area of the shoulder. So you see how the innervation of the axillary is in this region? Makes sense, right? And then we have musculocutaneous. It innervates so that's the musculocutaneous. Innervates your biceps brachii, and brachialis, so flexors of the forearm, okay, and the skin of the anterior forearm. Median. Median is this one here, and think about in the middle. So you have one here that we need to know, musculocutaneous, and now median. Actually, let's talk about radial first. Radial comes first. Radial is posterior. So whatever is green here, you see how green is the posterior divisions? So green, posterior. So the radial nerve innervates all the extensor muscles and the posterior skin of your arm, okay? There is another picture that I think it shows better how the radial is a nerve that kind of goes through your armpit, and we're gonna talk about problems with that, okay? And then now we have median. The median innervates most of the flexors of the arm, and then forearm pronators. What is pronation? We didn't really talk about these muscles. We didn't name these muscles, but forearm pronation, muscles that allow you to do this, right? Move your hand from anatomic position with the back of your hand facing forward, okay? And then one thing that is important about the median, so now let's look at a picture that shows all the way where so here is the radial, that it comes just all the way to where the brachioradialis is, right? Remember that muscle right here, brachioradialis. And then the median, which is this guy over here, look where it goes. It goes all the way to this finger, this finger, and this finger. So these three fingers are affected by the median nerve. What am I trying to say? Remember carpal syndrome, carpal tunnel syndrome? Sometimes there is a ligament that passes around, that wraps around the median nerve that can, by inflammation or different conditions, even pregnancy can lead to that, starts to strangulate the median nerve. What happens? You start to have numbness in these three fingers, okay? Not in the annular and the pinky finger, the other three, okay? So when you feel these three fingers numb, it could be related to carpal tunnel syndrome. And then depending on the situation, you can solve with just immobilization. Other situations, you may need surgery to, release that pressure from the nerve. So that's the median nerve, okay? So that's the nerve related to carpal tunnel syndrome. What I wanted to tell you, and then the ulnar nerve, which is the last one. That you see, it's the most medial one, aligned with the ulna, and that nerve innervates the flexors of hand, skin of hand, and hand muscles related to flexing fingers. Okay, so muscles related to flexing hand and fingers. That's the ulnar nerve. You see here how the radial passes right, is the green one, passes right in under the armpit. What is the problem with that? Look at this poor guy. He drank too much and he slept on the chair with the arm pressing the ulnar nerve under the armpit because of the chair, right? What happens? It's called Saturday night paralysis. So if an intoxicated person falls asleep with an arm draped over the back of a chair or a sofa edge, cutting off the blood supply to the radial nerve, you paralyze that arm. And for some time you cannot do anything, okay? And it causes a trauma to that nerve. So it's a big deal here because you're impairing also blood supply and you're just damaging that nerve, okay? And then you cannot extend your hand at the wrist because that's what radial nerve is related to. All the extensor muscles of the arm and posterior skin of the arm, okay, are innervated by the radial nerve. Let's talk about lumbosacral plexuses and lower limbs. So lumbosacral, they're actually one plexuses, but we divide them in two, lumbar and sacral, because there are some braiding that fuse together lumbar and sacral nerves. So let's talk first about the lumbar plexus. The nerve that we need to know is the femoral nerve. So the femoral nerve innervates quadriceps. This is the femoral, you see here. And then it branches into lateral femoral, which is actually, there is another branching that ends up here. And then anterior femoral, which is this part over here. There are many different branches from this nerve, but we just need to know the femoral, okay? So this nerve innervates, you see how there are so many branches of this nerve in the quadriceps, the anterior muscles of the thigh. Remember the quadricep muscles, which are the rectus femoris, vastus medialis, lateralis, and intermedius. So all those nerves, all those muscles are innervated by the femoral nerve. And medial surface of the leg, so cutaneous branches of this part of the leg, okay? So that's femoral. And now let's talk about anterior. So sacral nerves, and mostly we're gonna talk here about the sciatic, which is this guy over here. Sciatic is the longest and thickest nerve of the body, and it is innervation for hamstring muscles. Remember, which are the hamstring muscles that are in this region of your posterior leg? Biceps femoris, semitendinosus, semimembranosus, right? So these muscles are innervated by the sciatic, also adductor magnus, and most muscles on your leg and foot, lower leg and foot. You see how there is branching everywhere here? And there is a very important bifurcation or branching of the sciatic nerve. That is the common fibular, which is here, and the tibial, which is here. And these two branches are important in innervation of lower leg muscles, okay? Posterior, right? Everybody heard of sciatica, right? Stabbing pain irradiating over course of the sciatic nerve. So any pressure around the sciatic nerve that could be in the spinal cord because of some type of herniated disc, or any other pressure by muscle when you're pregnant, it's very common for you to, because of the increasing volume that you have in that area of the body, your muscles start to press the sciatic nerve and you have that type of unpleasant pain, Okay, you see, inflamed muscle also can compress it and cause it to inflame and cause pain. What else do I want to tell you here? We have dermatomes. So remember, all these nerves are innervating muscle, but they have cutaneous branches that is the innervation for skin. Here is a map that shows you, for example, let's look at this L1. What is L1 here? All this area that they're naming as L1, see, all this here is innervated by lumbar nerve 1. Okay? So the branches for skin are divided like this. So the nerve T9, thoracic 9, is going to innervate only this area, this horizontal area of your abdomen. And the same goes for posterior. Okay? So you can see what nerve innervates a specific part of your body. All right, so now we're ready to talk about reflex arcs. What is a reflex arc? Definition. You have a receptor in a specific organ. It could be the skin, it could be somewhere else. And that sensory information travels to your spinal cord, and you're like, I know what happens, and then it goes to the brain. No, in this case, it does not go up to the brain. It's only in the spinal cord, in that local part of the spinal cord where the sensory neuron arrived. There is an integration, right? There's always interneurons in the brain integrating these functions. And then a motor neuron that innervates some type of effector that could be a skeletal muscle, okay? So when we talk about spinal reflexes, remember that it only happens in the spinal cord. There are some testing of somatic reflexes that are important clinically to assess conditions of the nervous system. That's why they are so well described. And we are going to focus on only two of them, which is the stretch patellar reflex and the crossed extensor reflex. So when we talk about the stretch, and I have some videos here that later you guys can look at. So how the stretch reflex works. Let's look at this. Actually, I think I want to go ahead and show you this. So what happens is that first, it's considered what's the name of that? There are like different neurons, multisynaptic, I think that's the word that they use. So there are different interconnections for that reflex to happen. So you start with the sensory information that I should have the blue here going, right? That goes all the way to the spinal cord. And then you have interneuron connections. And then you have two different types of neurons coming from the ventral side of the spinal cord through maybe the same nerve, okay? So one is going to innervate your quadriceps. The other is going to innervate your hamstrings. So what happens here? You use the mallet and you hit your patellar ligament. Remember the ligament under the patella. And when that happens, let's see if I can zoom it out. When that happens, you are stretching this part, this tendon. And when you stretch that tendon, that tells the muscle spindle inside your quadricep muscles that your quadricep extensors, right? That extend, that there's something stretching your leg and you need to contract so you extend your leg. For you to extend your leg, what else do you need to happen for this to be super quick and automatic? Inhibition of the hamstrings, right? So there is an inhibitory neuron here, this 3B, that will inhibit the hamstrings from contracting. So you only contract the quadriceps and you kick your leg out. So this is the knee jerk reflex or patella reflex. That is a stretch reflex. Okay? There are other ones that you may study in the lab, but for a lecture I really wanted to focus on these two because I think they're the main ones. So now let's look at, make this smaller. Whoops. Now let's look at the cross extensor reflex. So what happens here? You have this is the situation, and you have the same situation happen with other parts of the body, like with the legs, but I think this is a very good example. When you somebody holds your arm, you see somebody holding your arm, and when that happens, the first reflex you have is to flex the arm that was held and extend the opposite one. Okay, so all this happens through an arch reflex, and this arc reflex inhibits what? In this arm is going to inhibit the extensors and activate the flexor. In the other arm is the other way. Is going to activate the extensor, so you extend the opposite hand and relax the flexor. How cool is this? This is a reflex, and it all happens because of excitatory or inhibitory interneurons. Okay, so this does not happen because you want. It's a reflex. Okay, it happens because you were caught, suddenly somebody grabbed your arm, and that's how that happens. So there are other reflexes. There is plantar reflex, and I also put a video about this. This is a reflex that they use it's common to be tested in babies when they're born, and that sign changes in adults. So if adults have the same type of reflex as the babies, it means there's some type of damage in some corticospinal tract. Okay, but I'm not asking about this one in exams. Okay, that's it for chapter 13. We're done. I will talk to you soon when we talk about the one before the last chapter, 14. Okay? Bye.